The morning Emily Parker turned 32. She woke up to silence so complete it almost rang in her ears. No buzzing phone, no missed calls, no cheerful notification lighting up the screen. For a brief second, she let herself hope. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe this would be the year they surprised her. Then she checked her phone. Nothing. Emily lay still in her small Chicago apartment, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, like it had nowhere urgent to be. Outside, the city was already alive: cars honking, someone laughing on the sidewalk, a bus pulling away. The world was moving forward, just not toward her. Every year was the same. Her family never said they didn't care. It just acted like her birthday was a minor detail, something easy to forget and even easier to explain away later. There was always an excuse: ready work deadlines, school schedules, long drives, tired weekends. Emily had learned to nod, smile, and say, "It's okay, I understand." But understanding didn't stop the quiet ache that settled in her chest every year. She got up, made coffee, and stood by the window, holding the warm mug between her hands. From the 12th floor, the city looked distant and unreal, like she was watching life instead of living it. She remembered her 10th birthday waiting by the door for hours because her parents said they'd be home early. They came back late, tired, apologetic, with a grocery store cupcake that had smeared frosting. She told herself it didn't matter. She remembered her 21st everyone promising dinner soon, then canceling one by one. She ate takeout alone and pretended she preferred it that way. By 32, she was tired of pretending. This year, Emily had made a decision she hadn't told anyone about. 3 months ago, she had driven north on a whim, escaping the noise of the city after another long week of work. She followed a narrow road that curved through tall trees until she reached a quiet lake in northern Michigan. The water was calm, the air clean, and the silence felt kind instead of lonely. There was a small cabin for sale near the shore. Nothing fancy. Weathered wood, a simple porch, and windows that faced the water like they were meant to watch sunsets. Emily didn't plan to buy it that day. But something inside her softened when she stepped onto the porch. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt present. She had worked hard for years: steady job, careful savings, no big splurges. Her family never noticed because they never asked. In their eyes, Emily was still the same quiet middle child who didn't need much and never complained. They didn't know how often she chose responsibility over comfort. They didn't know how much she carried alone, so she bought the cabin. Back in the present, Emily finished her coffee and checked the time. Still no messages. She didn't wait anymore. She packed a small bag, grabbed her car keys, and locked the apartment behind her. The drive north felt lighter than she expected. With every mile, the weight of old expectations slipped away. The highway stretched wide and open, and Emily rolled the window down, letting cold air brush her face. She passed familiar exits, then unfamiliar ones, until the city faded into trees and open sky. She reached the cabin in the afternoon. The lake was still, reflecting the pale winter sun like a sheet of glass. Emily stepped out of the car and stood there for a moment, breathing it in. No noise, no pressure. No one asking why she wasn't more or louder or different. Inside, the cabin smelled like fresh wood and clean air. Sunlight poured through the windows, warming the wooden floor. Emily set her bag down and laughed softly, not because something funny happened, but because she felt free. She placed a small cake on the kitchen table, chocolate, her favorite. She lit one candle and whispered, "Happy birthday, Emily." There were no witnesses, no applause, but it felt real. As evening fell, she wrapped herself in a blanket and sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and purple. The lake darkened slowly, like it was settling into rest. Her phone buzzed. Emily didn't rush to pick it up. She already knew who it would be. A group message from her family. "Sorry we missed today. Hope you've had a good day. Things got crazy. Maybe we can do something next weekend." Emily stared at the screen. The familiar disappointment tried to rise. but it didn't have the same power anymore. She wasn't waiting at the door this time. She typed calmly. Next. Weekend works. I'll host. I have a place by the lake now. She sent the message and set the phone down. Seconds passed, then minutes. Finally, her phone buzzed again. Then again, then again. You bought a place. A lake place. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?
Oh,
It big. Can we come? Emily read every message without rushing. Their sudden interest felt strange, almost unreal. For years, she had been background noise. Now, she was news. She replied once, "Sure, come by Saturday." That night, she slept deeply, the kind of sleep that comes when you stop replaying old disappointments in your head. In the morning, she woke to sunlight on the lake and the soft sound of water moving against the shore. She made breakfast slowly, enjoying each quiet moment. She knew what was coming. Her family would arrive, curious, surprised, maybe even impressed. They would see her differently now, because she had changed, but because she owned something they valued. But Emily wasn't hosting to prove anything. She was hosting because this was her space, her life, and she no longer needed approval to claim it. As she stood on the porch, looking out at the lake, Emily felt something new settle in her chest. Peace. For years, her birthdays passed unnoticed. This year, she didn't disappear. She had built something of her own. And when her family arrived, next weekend, they would walk into more than a cabin. They would walk into the life they never bothered to look at until now. The morning her family arrived at Emily's lake cabin, the air felt charged, like the world was holding its breath. She watched from the porch as 3 separate cars drove down the gravel road, kicking up dust in the calm, crisp morning. Her mother, her older sister Rachel, and her younger brother Mark stepped out. Their expressions a mix of curiosity, surprise, and something Emily couldn't quite name. They weren't used to seeing her like this, confident, independent, at ease, in a place she owned entirely herself. Emily stepped forward as they approached, a small smile on her face. The hugs were careful, almost tentative, like they weren't sure how close to get. Her mother's eyes widened at the sight of the cabin. Rachel whispered something to her husband, and Mark laughed nervously, unsure whether to joke or admire. Emily didn't mind their hesitance. She'd waited long enough to care. "This is beautiful," her mother said softly, scanning the cabin and the lake beyond it. There was awe in her voice, but it carried a subtle undertone of guilt. Emily nodded and said thank you. "I'm glad you came." The family wandered through the cabin, touching the furniture, opening the windows, and peeking out at the lake. Emily stayed close, letting them explore but not hovering. She wanted them to see it for themselves, not through her eyes. "Since when did you buy this place?" Rachel asked, her tone a mix of excitement and suspicion. She circled the room, her hands on the counter and the wooden railing, like she was trying to measure how real it was. Emily smiled lightly. "A few months ago, didn't think it was anyone else's business." Mark, who had always been a bit loud and impulsive, laughed nervously. "I mean, wow, you didn't tell anyone? That's impressive, I guess." He glanced at Rachel and their mother. "Guess we missed the memo." Emily led them outside. The dock stretched into the calm lake, and the morning sunlight glittered on the water. It was quiet, except for the occasional bird and the soft lapping of water. She handed everyone a cup of coffee and let them take in the view as they sipped in silence. Emily noticed subtle changes in the way they looked at her. Curiosity, respect, even a hint of envy. They had always seen her as quiet, passive, almost invisible. But here she wasn't invisible. She was in control. She was whole. They sat on the porch, and eventually Rachel broke the silence. "I guess we underestimated you." The words were casual, but Emily felt their weight. They weren't just talking about the cabin. They were acknowledging years of ignoring, dismissing, and overlooking her. Emily leaned back, letting the words settle. "I think you stopped seeing me a long time ago," she said. calm but firm. I didn't need you to notice, but I do need to be acknowledged. Her mother's face softened. We thought you were content. We never said anything, and we assumed. Emily interrupted gently. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't want it, but I did want to be seen. No one spoke for a long moment. The silence wasn't awkward. It was honest. It carried years of misunderstanding, frustration, and unspoken truths. For the first time, Emily didn't feel invisible. She felt heard, even if only through her own words. Later, they cooked dinner together in the small but cozy kitchen. The mood lightened as they chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and joked quietly. The awkwardness melted into small moments of connection. Her mother asked about her work. Rachel laughed at Mark's clumsy attempts to flip pancakes. And Emily found herself genuinely enjoying their company. When the meal was ready, they carried plates out to the dock. The lake reflected the sunset, turning the sky orange and pink. They sat on folding chairs, eating slowly, talking softly. The warmth of the meal, the laughter, and the water stretching out in front of them made Emily feel something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. Later, when everyone had gone inside, Emily stepped onto the dock. The lake was quiet again, shimmering under the early evening stars. Daniel, a family friend who had come along last minute, joined her. He had always been kind and attentive, someone who noticed when Emily wasn't saying anything. You seem lighter here, he said quietly, settling on the edge of the dock. Emily smiled, staring at the water. I am this place. It feels like it's mine. It's for the first time. I don't have to explain myself or wait for anyone's permission. Daniel nodded. They sat in silence, the kind of comfortable silence that comes from understanding without words. The stars reflected in the water. And Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't realized she was missing. The next morning, her family surprised her. They brought breakfast to the porch: pancakes, fruit, fresh coffee, and even a small wrapped gift. Her mother's eyes were soft as she said, We should have done better. We want to do better. Emily accepted the apology with a gentle smile. She didn't need it, not really. What mattered was that she had built something of her own, something that no one could ignore. The cabin, the lake, the silence, they weren't just a retreat. They were proof that she could stand on her own, that her family packed up to leave. Emily walked them to their cars, feeling a strange mix of relief and empowerment. She had welcomed them, shown them who she had become, and yet she didn't need their validation. She waved goodbye, watched their cars disappear down the gravel road, and returned to the cabin. Inside, she opened the windows, letting fresh air fill the rooms. Sunlight danced across the wooden floors, and the smell of pine drifted in from outside. She walked through the cabin, touching the surfaces, imagining the life she would build here. For the first time, her birthday didn't feel like a mark of neglect. It felt like a beginning. Emily sat on the porch again, looking out over the lake. The water reflected the sky, the trees, and herself. She realized she didn't need to wait for recognition anymore. She didn't need her family to remember her birthday or validate her choices. She had created her own space, her own life, her own happiness. That the lake stretched before her, quiet and infinite. And Emily felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known she needed. The past years of being ignored didn't vanish, but they no longer held power over her. She had chosen herself. She had claimed her space. And in that choice, she found strength, peace, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing you are truly seen not by others, but by yourself. Emily stayed on the dock long after the sun rose, watching the water move gently, letting the quiet fill her completely. Her birthday had passed, her family had come, but more than that, something had shifted inside her. She was no longer waiting for anyone to notice. She had noticed herself. She had claimed her life. She had finally come home.